A little black girl comes home in tears, her clothes messy and her voice trembling. The bus driver did it again, she says. Shaken by the pain in his daughter's eyes, her father immediately calls the police without hesitation. What followed forced an entire town to confront a truth it had ignored for far too long. Watch till the end, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this were your child? Maple Hollow was never about luxury. It was about opportunity. For Veronica and Derek Hill, moving there meant longer commutes, tighter budgets, and starting over in a town where they knew no one. But it also meant better schools, safer streets, and, most importantly, a real chance for their daughter, Ariel, to thrive. That was all that mattered. From the moment the moving truck pulled away and the last box hit the floor, it was clear they were the only black family on the entire street. Neighbors smiled with tight lips. Conversations paused when they walked by. But Veronica kept telling herself, this is for Ariel. On their very first morning, Ariel stood by the curb with her backpack waiting for the school bus to arrive. She looked up and down the unfamiliar street, clutching her notebook like it could protect her from the unknown. She was just 8, but already trying to be strong. The yellow school bus rumbled into view and came to a slow, hissing stop. The door folded open, revealing Mr. Aldrich, a white man in his 60s with a trimmed mustache and a calm, unreadable face. He glanced at Ariel, then at her parents. First day? He asked flatly. Yes, Veronica replied, stepping forward. We just moved in. This is Ariel. He gave a short nod. Well, come on then. Ariel glanced back at her parents. Veronica smiled. Derek gave her a reassuring thumbs up. She climbed the steps, and the doors closed behind her with a final thud. As the bus rolled away, Veronica stood rooted in place, her chest tight with something she couldn't quite name yet. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. But something didn't sit right. By the end of that first week, Veronica began noticing shifts in Ariel's behavior, subtle at first, but unmistakable to a mother's eye. The child who once bounced through the door with stories and questions now entered the house quiet and distant. Her answers became short. Her laughter, less frequent. She ate slower. Drew less. And every day, when asked about school, she offered the same answer. It was fine. At first, Derek tried to rationalize it. She's just settling in, he said over dinner. New place. New faces. She's probably just tired. But Veronica wasn't convinced. One night, as she tucked Ariel into bed, she asked again about her day, this time about the bus ride. Ariel looked away and mumbled, he's just mean sometimes. Veronica's voice softened. Who is? The bus driver, Ariel said. Mr. Aldrich. Veronica pressed gently, but Ariel didn't say more. She turned over and pulled the blanket up to her chin. That night, Veronica lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The quiet, the distance, the nervous energy in Ariel's body, it wasn't just new school nerves. It felt heavier. She knew that look. That silence. It was fear pretending to be fine. The next morning, Veronica stood at the front window, pretending to sip her coffee, eyes fixed on the curb outside. Ariel waited quietly by the mailbox, backpack on, shoulders slouched just slightly. She wasn't fidgeting. She wasn't smiling. Just standing there, staring down the street. 2 other neighborhood kids arrived minutes later, white, chatty, loud in the way that said they belonged here. They never once acknowledging Ariel. When the yellow school bus finally came into view, it slowed to a stop right in front of their house. The door creaked open, and Mr. Aldridge nodded toward the 2 white children, who immediately climbed on. He didn't look at Ariel until they were already halfway up the steps. Only then did he motion slightly, like giving her permission. Ariel boarded last, her head down, without a word. From her window, Veronica could see it, the tension in her daughter's body. The way her hands gripped the straps on her backpack just a little too tightly, that was all Veronica needed to see. She grabbed her keys. Within minutes, she was following the school bus through Maple Hollow's winding streets. She stayed 2 cars back, keeping a careful distance. Every stop looked the same, smiling kids, waving parents, and Mr. Aldridge wearing that same unreadable expression. By the time the bus reached the school, Veronica had parked across the street from the drop-off zone. She watched silently as children exited the bus in small bursts of laughter and backpacks swinging. Mr. Aldridge even knelt down to tie a little boy's shoelace, smiling as he sent him off. Then Ariel stepped down. She didn't smile. She didn't look around. She just walked forward, quiet and small. As she passed him, Mr. Aldridge gently placed a hand on her shoulder. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a kind gesture. To Veronica, it was something else entirely. It wasn't comfort. It was control. That night, Veronica didn't tell Derek what she'd seen. She didn't have the words, not yet. But she couldn't ignore what was unfolding, and she wouldn't wait any longer. Tomorrow, she was going to speak with someone in the neighborhood. The following afternoon, Veronica took Ariel to the local park. It was the same clean, manicured space she'd seen in real estate brochures, a couple of swings, a wooden slide, and a single weathered bench beneath a large elm tree. Ariel quietly made her way to the swing set, kicking off slowly, her expression distant. Veronica sat on the bench, pretending to scroll through her phone, her mind turning over the image of Mr. Aldridge's hand on her daughter's shoulder. She wasn't sure what she was expecting when she looked up and saw Mrs. Callahan walking her dog along the paved path. The woman was in her mid-50s, with neatly curled blonde hair and sunglasses perched on her head. She smiled when she saw Veronica, as if nothing in the world was wrong. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she said, her voice chipper. Veronica nodded. "It is. Mind if I join you?" Mrs. Callahan motioned to the empty end of the bench. "Go ahead." They made small talk for a few minutes, about the weather, the neighborhood, and where to find the best grocery store. Then Veronica took a breath and asked the question she had been rehearsing since last night. "Can I ask you something?" "It's about the school bus driver, Mr. Aldridge." Mrs. Callahan didn't answer right away. Her smile froze in place, but her eyes sharpened. "What about him?" "My daughter mentioned he sometimes says things that make her uncomfortable. I've noticed he always lets her board last, even when she's standing there first." Veronica kept her tone calm, careful. "I'm just wondering if you've ever heard anything concerning." The change in Mrs. Callahan's expression was instant. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold, clipped glare. "I don't think it's your place to question people who've been part of this community for decades," she snapped. "Mr. Aldridge has driven the kids around here for years. Never a single complaint. Not one." Veronica blinked, surprised at the hostility. "I'm not accusing him. I'm just asking if anyone else has." "You people come in here and start stirring the pot," Mrs. Callahan interrupted, her voice now low and hard. "Always thinking there's a problem, always trying to find one." Veronica stared at her, stunned. "If you don't like how things work in Maple Hollow," Mrs. Callahan continued, rising from the bench and tightening the leash in her hand, "maybe you should leave. Honestly, I think you'd be doing everyone a favor." The word struck with the force of a slap. Across the park, Ariel had stopped swinging. She was staring at her mother, wide-eyed. Veronica didn't speak. She simply nodded and watched as Mrs. Callahan walked away without another word, her dog trotting dutifully beside her. For a long moment, Veronica remained on the bench, her jaw clenched, heart thudding against her ribs. She had come to this town hoping to build something better for her child. But Maple Hollow had just revealed its true face. That night, Veronica didn't share the confrontation with Derek. But her silence wasn't fear. It was resolve, because now, she wasn't just suspicious. She was certain. The next day began like any other. Ariel ate her cereal without a word, eyes fixed on the table. Derek had already left for work, and Veronica, still carrying the weight of yesterday's confrontation with Mrs. Callahan, was trying to mask her nerves with routine. She brushed Ariel's hair, packed her lunch, and walked her to the curb in silence. The bus pulled up at exactly 7:42 a.m. As always, Mr. Aldridge greeted the other two children first. Ariel stepped on last, her face blank. The door shut behind her, and the bus rumbled away. Veronica stood there for a while, just watching the space where the bus had disappeared. She tried to work. She cleaned the kitchen. She answered 2 emails. But her mind kept drifting. Something still wasn't right. Ariel's silence was no longer just unsettling, it was beginning to feel suffocating. At 4 p.m., Veronica stood by the window waiting for the bus. Ariel was always home by then. At 4:10, there was no sign of it. By 4:20, Veronica had stepped outside. By 4:30, she was pacing the front yard, phone in hand. She called Derek. Ariel isn't home. There was a pause. I'm leaving work now, he said. Call the school. I'll be there in 15. Veronica dialed the elementary office, her voice tight. The receptionist explained that all buses had already returned to the depot and the school was closed for the day. But my daughter isn't home, Veronica said, her voice beginning to shake. She should have been here over 30 minutes ago. I'm sorry, ma'am, the receptionist replied. If she doesn't return soon, you may want to contact the police. Veronica hung up, her hands trembling. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. She called the bus depot next, no answer. Then again. Still nothing. When Derek walked through the door at 5:15, he found Veronica near tears, still trying to get someone on the line. This is all my fault, she whispered, staring at the screen. I knew something was wrong. No, Derek said, gripping her shoulders. We don't know anything yet. We'll find her. And just as Veronica was about to grab her keys to start driving through the neighborhood, the front door creaked open. Ariel stepped inside. Her yellow skirt was rumpled. Her pink shirt was half untucked. Her braids were loose and frizzy, and her backpack hung off one shoulder like it had nearly fallen apart. She looked up at them with wide, tired eyes. Veronica dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around her. Where were you? She whispered. We were so scared. Derek joined them, folding both of them into his arms. For a moment, they just held her. But when Veronica pulled back and looked into her daughter's face, she felt her stomach drop. Ariel's eyes were full of tears, and her voice, when she spoke, was barely a whisper. The bus driver did it again. The room went completely still. Veronica and Derek looked at each other, stunned, struggling to comprehend what their daughter had just said. Ariel stood between them, shoulders hunched, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her skirt. Her lips trembled, but the silence wasn't from uncertainty. It was from fear. Veronica knelt in front of her, gently cupping her daughter's face. What do you mean, sweetheart? She asked, her voice shaking. What did Mr. Aldridge do? Ariel's eyes welled with fresh tears. She glanced between her parents, then down at the floor. It took her a moment, but then the words began to spill out, quiet at first, then pouring like a flood. He doesn't like me, she whispered. He says things, mean things. About people like us. Veronica felt the air leave her lungs. Derek stepped closer, kneeling beside them. What kind of things? He asked softly. Ariel sniffled. He says I don't belong here. That we don't belong. He talks under his breath when I get on the bus. Sometimes he stares at me in the mirror and just shakes his head. I never know what I did wrong. Her voice faltered. And the first time. She paused, swallowing hard. He told me to get off early. He said I'd figure out how to get home if I wanted to live here so badly. I didn't know where I was. I walked and walked until someone showed me the way. Veronica gasped. When? When did that happen? Ariel looked away. A few days ago. Derek's fists clenched at his sides. And you didn't tell us? He asked, not in anger, but in pain. He said, if I told anyone, no one would believe me. That everyone here knows him, and no one knows us. He said if I talked, people would make us leave. That he'd make sure we were run out. Veronica couldn't hold back her tears. She wrapped Ariel in her arms, holding her like she was trying to pull her back from something she couldn't see. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Derek stood and began pacing the room, his jaw tight, eyes burning. This is it, he muttered. We're not letting this go. He picked up his phone and turned to Veronica. We're calling the police. Tonight. Ariel's eyes widened in fear. But what if they don't believe me? She asked. What if he was right? Veronica pulled back and looked her daughter in the eye. Then we make them believe you. The sirens weren't blaring. They didn't need to be. When the knock finally came at the door, it was sharp and deliberate. Veronica opened it to find two uniformed officers standing on their porch, a tall, middle-aged white man with a clipboard and a younger black woman beside him with kind but alert eyes. "Good evening," the man said. "I'm Officer Bradley. This is my partner, Officer Lena Moore. We received a call about a possible child endangerment case." Derek stepped forward and opened the door wider. "That was us. Please, come in." The officers entered and immediately scanned the living room. Ariel sat quietly on the couch, holding a small stuffed animal in her lap. Her eyes darted to the officers, unsure of what came next. Officer Moore approached her slowly and crouched to her level. "Hi, Ariel," she said gently. "I'm here to listen. Only if you're ready, okay?" Ariel looked up at her parents. Veronica nodded softly. Derek stood behind her, unmoving, arms crossed with fire in his eyes. Over the next hour, the family laid everything out: the changes in Ariel's behavior, the strange bus interactions, the early drop-off, and finally, that night's terrifying delay. Ariel spoke in short bursts, trembling at times, glancing at her mother for reassurance. But as the story came together, the shape of the truth became clear. Officer Bradley listened without interrupting. When it was over, he cleared his throat. "That's a serious accusation," he said, his voice neutral. "Mr. Aldrich has worked in this district for over 30 years. He's never had a formal complaint." Veronica's eyes flared. "So what are you saying? That you don't believe her?" Before he could answer, Officer Moore stepped in. "We're saying this needs to be investigated carefully," she said. "And thoroughly. We're not dismissing anything. I'd like to speak with Mr. Aldrich directly, off record first, if necessary." Bradley nodded reluctantly. "We'll head to his residence. But we'll need to corroborate some of this. Are there any other students who may have witnessed his behavior?" Ariel shook her head. "He always makes sure I'm the last one on. The last one off. Sometimes the others aren't even around." Veronica's voice was low but firm. "Then you'll have to listen to her. Because she's telling the truth." Bradley hesitated, then gave a tight nod. "We'll speak with him tonight." Veronica stepped forward. "We want to be there." "Ma'am, that's not protocol." "I don't care about protocol. This is my daughter." Officer Moore glanced at her partner. Then back at Veronica. "You can ride with us." The patrol car came to a stop in front of a modest, well-kept home just 2 streets away. Officer Bradley led the way up the front steps, with Officer Moore walking just behind him. Veronica and Derek followed, standing just off to the side as the officers knocked. When the door opened, Mr. Aldrich looked surprised to see the uniformed officers, but that surprise quickly shifted. His expression hardened into something cold and practiced. He crossed his arms, listening with growing impatience as Officer Moore explained the reason for their visit. Veronica stood just behind Officer Moore, her eyes locked on the man who had made her daughter feel invisible. He wouldn't even look at her. "I treat every student the same," he said flatly. "I don't know where this is coming from." "Sir," Officer Bradley said, "these are serious claims: racial harassment, unsafe drop-offs." "They're just trying to cause trouble," Mr. Aldrich snapped. "It's always the same story with people like—" He stopped himself mid-sentence. But it was too late. Veronica's breath caught. Derek stepped forward. And then, just as the silence became unbearable, a voice rang out from across the street. "Wait! I heard what's going on. I need to speak to the officers." Everyone turned. A black woman, wearing scrubs and a backpack slung over one shoulder, jogged toward the group. She looked exhausted, but determined. Veronica recognized her from the school orientation, a quiet woman who stood off to the side with her twin boys. "My name's Nicole Bennett," she said, breathing hard. "Mr. Aldrich drove my boys last year. They were in 3rd grade. And he did the same thing to them." Mr. Aldrich's jaw clenched. Nicole pointed at him. "He told them they didn't belong. Made them sit in the front seat like they were animals. Then one day he dropped them 3 blocks from our stop. Said he got confused." She turned to Officer Moore. "I didn't report it because I was afraid. Afraid no one would believe me. But now I know I wasn't the only one." Veronica's chest ached. She stepped forward and met Nicole's eyes. "You weren't," she said. Officer Moore glanced at Officer Bradley. The atmosphere shifted. For the first time since they knocked on the door, the weight of the truth had cracked open something real. "We'll need your statement," Officer Moore said. Nicole nodded. "I'll give it. And I know other parents who will too." They just needed someone to go first. Mr. Aldrich stood frozen, his confidence unraveling by the second. Because now, the silence was broken. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind Veronica never saw coming. After Nicole Bennett's brave statement outside Mr. Aldrich's home, things began to shift rapidly. Word spread faster than anyone anticipated. By morning, 3 more families had come forward, 2 Black, 1 Latino, each with similar stories. Muted hostility. Off-route drop-offs. Snide remarks that always came with a smile. None had ever filed complaints. Not because they hadn't wanted to, but because they didn't think anyone would listen. Now, they were listening. The police opened a formal investigation. The school district issued a public statement promising full cooperation. And by the end of the week, Mr. Aldrich was placed on administrative leave. But the story didn't stop there. Reporters started showing up on front lawns. Cameras parked across the street from Veronica's house. Headlines blasted across local and national news feeds. Respected bus driver accused of racial targeting in affluent suburb. What had started as a mother's quiet suspicion had now ignited a firestorm. Some in Maple Hollow rallied in support. Others did not. One morning, as Veronica opened her front door to pick up the newspaper, she found an anonymous note folded on the porch. "Some people should know when to stay quiet." She didn't show it to Derek. She simply folded it in half and tossed it in the trash. But later that evening, as she tucked Ariel into bed, the fear crept back in. "What if it doesn't change anything?" she whispered to Derek once they were alone. "What if they cover it up? What if this all just fades?" Derek looked at her, eyes tired but steady. "Then we don't let it." Veronica knew he was right. And that meant facing the town head-on. Next day, they were at the Birchfield School Board meeting. Dozens of parents packed the gymnasium, their voices rising before the microphones were even turned on. Some held signs demanding answers. Others crossed their arms, scowling like they'd been personally inconvenienced by the truth. Veronica sat in the front row, flanked by Derek on one side and Nicole Bennett on the other. Ariel stayed home with a sitter. She didn't need to see this, not yet. A board member took the podium, cleared his throat, and began. "We understand the concerns brought forward regarding Mr. Aldrich. Please know the district is investigating these claims thoroughly. We asked for patience during this time." A woman stood and interrupted. "He's been driving our kids for 30 years. Why are we listening to this nonsense now?" Another parent shouted back, "Because your kids didn't get dropped off alone in the middle of nowhere." The room erupted. Arguments broke out. Some parents stood to clap. Others booed. One man yelled, "This is just one bad apple. You don't tear down the whole system for one mistake." Veronica felt her stomach twist. She knew this wasn't just about Mr. Aldrich. It was about all the people who stayed silent while he did it. She stood and walked to the podium slowly, gripping a folded piece of paper in her hand, not because she needed it, but because it steadied her. "My name is Veronica Hill," she said into the microphone. "My daughter, Ariel, was one of the children targeted by Mr. Aldrich." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She was 8 years old. New to this school. New to this town. And every day, she came home smaller, quieter. I knew something was wrong. I followed the bus. I saw how she was treated. And then, one day, she didn't come home. She walked alone for over an hour after he dropped her off miles away from our stop. He told her no one would believe her. That we didn't belong. Veronica scanned the room. Some avoided her gaze. Others stared with wet eyes. This isn't about one man. This is about a system that allowed him to do it, over and over, because people here didn't want to believe it could happen. Because people here were comfortable with silence. But I'm not. And I never will be again. Veronica stepped away from the podium to a wave of hushed stillness. For the first time since all this began, no one had anything to say, and that was louder than anything else. By the next morning, the school board announced mandatory hearings. Mr. Aldrich was officially suspended without pay. A third-party investigator was brought in. And for the first time in its history, the Birchfield School District issued a public apology, not just to the Hills, but to every family that had been afraid to speak. But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Parents who had sat in silence for years started stepping forward. Not just about Mr. Aldridge, but about teachers who ignored their kids. Staff who dismissed concerns. A system that looked fair from the outside but made some children feel invisible inside it. In response, the district created a diversity and inclusion task force made up of parents, teachers, and community members. Veronica was asked to lead it. She hesitated. She hadn't asked for any of this. But when she looked at Ariel, now slowly returning to her old self, smiling more, speaking up again, she knew what she had to do. Yes, she told the board. But only if it's real change. Not a PR stunt. They agreed. Within a month, buses were equipped with security cameras. An anonymous reporting system was launched for students. Sensitivity and equity training became mandatory for all staff. Hiring policies shifted to reflect the community's diversity, not just its comfort. And still, Veronica didn't stop. She spoke at town halls. She visited classrooms. She met with other mothers, especially those who had been too afraid to speak before. Nicole Bennett became her closest ally. What began with fear turned into partnership, then into power. Ariel no longer rode the same bus. Her new driver was a kind woman named Mrs. Carter, who greeted every child by name. And every morning, as Ariel waved goodbye from the steps of the bus, Veronica stood on the porch, not just as a mother, but as the reason that Maple Hollow would never be able to look away again. Sometimes, the most dangerous things aren't the ones we see, but the ones we choose to ignore. What started as a mother's quiet concern became a turning point for an entire community. Veronica didn't set out to become a leader. She simply refused to stay silent when her child was hurting. But this isn't just her story. It's a reminder that injustice doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, it hides behind politeness, tradition, and long-held positions of trust. And the only way to bring it into the light is to speak. To everyone watching, listening, or living in places like Maple Hollow, speak up. Even when your voice shakes. Even when they try to silence you. Have you ever been in a situation where your voice, or someone else's, was dismissed because it challenged the comfort of others? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who needs to read it today. And if this story moved you, taught you something, or simply made you think, please subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories that matter. Thank you for watching. Your presence, your attention, and your voice matter more than you know. And we'll see you in the next story.